That presentation was both concerning and really inspiring. And please, if every student could put at least one question in the chat. And while you're, oh, here we have one. So what is the best part of your job?
I love the field work. So as a NOAA diver, I get to go to some pretty cool and remote places. We have NOAA ships that come through my region every 3 years when we're not in this crazy COVID environment anyway. We were supposed to have one come through the last 2 years and it keeps getting postponed. So yeah, you guys are being impacted by this in a major way in these key years of your academics. But trust me, the entire world is definitely feeling this particular situation we're in right now. But I've been to reefs in places that only a handful of people in the world have been able to go to. You know, on dives where you have sharks and dolphins in the water together with you. Just some pretty amazing stuff in, you know, very beautiful and clear water. I first got certified in Seattle, and the water there is very cold. And there's also a very high nutrients in the water, which means that it's pretty murky. There are some really big fish and some very cool organisms up there, the giant octopus and stuff. But it wasn't really until I got to the tropics and started doing more diving here that I realized just how much I love being in the water. And it's the time that I get to spend in the water that I think is my favorite. Number two would be interactions with students. I take on local students, hauling scholars, opportunities like this to talk with you guys. I love being able to do that. I'm feeling like you might be having an influence on you know, the next generation is something that I think is really valuable, and I wish more professionals did it.
This question is from Aaliyah. You've obviously seen corals dying out when diving, but have you ever seen a coral reef be filled with fish and then a few years later it's empty?
Yeah, you know, fish are tricky. You can actually have that happen within just a day. So if you are on a reef where you have big schools of fish passing through, you can think that that reef has just this huge biomass of fish there. But fish are dynamic, right? There are damselfish and fish that are affiliated with particular corals that will stay in a place, but most fish will move. Which is one of the challenges that divers even have. And one of the reasons why they've been testing rebreather technology, because just the bubbles that you're making while you're underwater will spook certain fish. So oftentimes when you're doing fish counts, you actually need to start by the second you get in the water, trying to capture those fish that you know are the most skittish, which usually means like the bigger fish, the predator type fish, because they'll see you and then they'll leave. So, you know, fish are tough. But yes, definitely they come and go. And if you have a reef collapse, then they will just go. So they will not be coming back because they require either other fish there to eat or the right kinds of food, usually like little invertebrates and stuff for them to forage. And if they don't have the right algae, the right invertebrates, or the right fish for them to eat, they're not going to come back. So as a reef collapses and those ecosystem dynamics fall off, you'll have less and less fish.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Stefan asks, do you believe that your mapping of the resilience of reefs has become more accurate? And what were some of the reasons for the older maps' inaccuracies?
Yeah, definitely become more accurate. I think the big difference for us was that first set of data was what we would call, ended up being baseline data. So we had now this 0.1 in our time series where we knew what the reef looked like. And we made predictions based on that single point on how resilient, how strong we thought that reef was, because it had lots of coral or because it had lots of fish. Or because it was below a watershed that was a really healthy watershed. So because of those things, we thought, aha, this reef is strong. 6 years later, we were able to go back and actually see how the reefs did. So it went from that one point in time to two, and all of a sudden, instead of having what we call a theoretical resilience, we had what we call a demonstrated resilience. And we could actually say, well, over that 6-year period, this reef actually demonstrated that it was really strong and it's still healthy, even though we didn't think the watershed was very good. And even though before we didn't think there was enough fish here to manage the algae, we were wrong. This reef did well. But mostly what we saw was the other way. We thought this reef was going to do well. And then 6 years later, we came back and we're like, whoa, this reef did not do well. We were wrong.
Mateo asks, what have you seen that has restored your faith in humanity and the world?
That's a really big question. I would say sometimes you've got to narrow your focus a little bit. So if you continue to look super broad and you're hoping to pull that solution out of the sky because, you know, you, you can get really frustrated because maybe the answer is not always there. I had a daughter 4 years ago, and that changed my focus substantially in terms of my professional trajectory, but also like what I'm thinking I want to achieve in terms of my career. And I see the future, in you and in her, and not just what I want to leave as a legacy from myself for her, but also the tools that I want to give her so that when she gets to these situations, she's also able to make good decisions, informed decisions, and make change of her own. So, you know, fatherhood was a big one.
Mm-hmm. Riken asks, how long does it take to know whether the attempted introduction of coral in a given location was a success or a failure?
Yeah, and we're still in the infancy of that here. We've got 2 years or so of growth inside our nursery. We've only done one outplanting, so we call it when we move the coral fragments out to the reef. And they've only been there for 6 months. They're all doing well so far, but they also haven't experienced one of these really major bleaching events. So I think we will know, one, after we've actually had a chance to put more corals out. In the Caribbean, they've had a chance to put a lot more corals out, and they've been able to monitor them over extended periods of time. And they have a better idea there of which reef types have done well, which coral types have done better. And so they've been able to prioritize on those. We don't have that information yet, so we're testing it. And that's one of the important things about the pilot study that we're doing is you have to get out there and actually test it in your place, because not all places are the same, and the tools that work in the Caribbean or even down with our neighbors on Guam won't necessarily translate for us, just because of very subtle differences in our ecology or in our species or in the species of zooxanthellae that live within the corals. There's a lot of nuances there. And so you have to pilot test ideas, even if you're sure they're going to work, or even if you think there's no chance it's going to work. You still want to pilot some of these ideas just to see what sticks. And that's one of the issues that we've had locally, is that there's been a lot of emphasis put on developing management plans. So you've got a restoration plan and you're bringing a bunch of people together to talk about what you hope to do. And while they've been putting those plans together, we've been actually out there putting things in the water and trying to grow them out and seeing what they do. And it'll be interesting to see if the plans align with what we're actually seeing or not. But you can't just have one. If you can spend your entire time planning and never actually doing the application, and that's definitely not a place you want to be.
Mm-hmm. Sophia is wondering, how long are your trips? And if they're long, how do you work well with your teammates if you're with them for such a long time?
Yeah, the longest trips that I've been on would be Northern Island cruises. So I mentioned that the Marianas is a 14-island archipelago. Saipan is the fourth one up. So there's been NOAA cruise ships that would go all the way up to the 10 islands that are north of us and then around and back down. And you're on a relatively small ship for a couple weeks, maybe even closer to 3 weeks with folks on those. And you're spending your time either on dive boats, um, with the same people, underwater with the same people, eating in the chow hall with the same people, or cleaning and getting ready the next day with the same people. So it certainly is a situation where you can start to rub each other the wrong way if you're not careful. Luckily, most of the people who work in marine science and most of the people who are out on these cruises have a lot of experience being in those situations, and they're pumped up to be there. Like I said, for most of us, even though it does get exhausting, and at some point you feel like a robot out there because you spent so much time underwater, you're just your head is filled with water. But the reality is, you spend your entire year or 2 or 3 years to get to that point because you want to have those moments when you're underwater. So I'm lucky in that when you are in those situations where you're spending that much time with those people, everybody's pretty excited to be there and realizes how lucky they are to have that opportunity. Now, that being said, two of the people I've had to deal with in my professional career who I found the most difficult to deal with in my entire 25 years of work, whether it was at the university or at the territorial agency or now with NOAA, were folks that I had to deal with on cruises. One of them was a dive safety officer, and another one was a fellow scientist. And so when you have those situations, I've found you just have to minimize your interactions with that person. And, you know, to the extent that you can, stay professional and check that box when you have to, but don't go out of your way to try and, you know, early on you can sure try to fix whatever it is that you think is wrong, but when you realize something is actually broken and you can't really fix it, you just do your best with that. Change your focus to the extent that you can. Focus on those partnerships that are meaningful to you, that are actually giving you that, you know, what you need to be getting out of the experience or what you want to be getting out of the experience. Ride it out because you're stuck on a boat, and then move on as soon as you can get off.
Uh, so we have time for one more question. And Jake is wondering, where can we find more information about coral health, books, websites, etc.?
Yeah, so that movie I mentioned, we're not screen sharing anymore, right? But the movie I mentioned called Chasing Coral, it's a documentary you can find definitely on Netflix and I believe even on YouTube. I think if you just do a Google search for Chasing Coral streaming or something like that, it should point you at your opportunities to watch it, and that would be a great place to start. Um, yeah.
Great. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Steve. We're so grateful for the time you've taken today. And that wraps up our recorded portion.